There is a war happening inside your skull right now, and most people don't even know they're losing it. Not a war with another person. Not a war with your circumstances. A war with the voice that tells you you're not enough. The replay of conversations that went wrong 3 years ago. The 2 a.m. spiral about something that hasn't happened yet. The shame narrative that runs in the background like malware you can't find and can't delete. You've tried. You've told yourself to stop thinking about it. You've prayed over it. You've distracted yourself. You've white-knuckled your way through another day. And then, there it is again. The same thought, the same fear, the same loop. Let that sink in for a moment. If willpower alone could solve this, you would have solved it by now. If good intentions were enough, it would already be done. Something deeper is happening here. Something biological, something architectural. And until you understand it at that level, you'll keep fighting the symptom instead of addressing the root. That's exactly what this is about. Not motivation, not a pep talk. A real working understanding of why your thought life operates the way it does, and a practice grounded in both modern neuroscience and ancient scripture that can genuinely begin to shift the architecture of your mind. Stick with me. This matters more than you know. Here's what nobody tells you about the anxious, looping, shame-soaked thoughts that seem to arrive uninvited. They didn't just show up by accident. Think about this honestly for a second. When does the mental noise get loudest? When you're busy, engaged, solving a problem, or when you're alone, quiet, lying in bed with nothing to do? For most people, it's the second one. The moment the external stimulation drops, the internal noise floods in. And it's always the same themes, the same fears, the same regrets. You've probably asked yourself, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just think differently? Let me tell you something important. There is nothing wrong with you. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem isn't that your brain is broken. The problem is that your brain is extraordinarily well trained, just in the wrong direction. Every thought you've entertained, lingered on, rehearsed, replayed. You've been teaching your brain. You've been carving pathways. And now those pathways run automatically, without your permission, often without your awareness. You didn't choose this consciously. But somewhere along the way, fear got rehearsed enough to become fluent. Shame got repeated enough to become default. And now the mind runs those programs on autopilot. That's not weakness, that's neuroscience. And if neuroscience built the problem, neuroscience can be part of the solution. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, and it might be the most overlooked explanation for why your thought life feels so out of control. The default mode network, or DMN, is a web of interconnected brain regions that activates precisely when you are not focused on an external task. When your mind wanders, when you daydream, when you lie down at night and let your guard drop. It's sometimes called the brain's idle mode, but that name is misleading because it is anything but idle. When the DMN activates, your brain is intensely active, processing your past, projecting your future, and constructing your sense of self. Here's where it gets important. Research from institutions like Harvard Medical School and the Max Planck Institute has consistently shown that the content of DMN activity isn't random. It gravitates toward whatever neural pathways are most deeply reinforced. In plain language, your resting brain defaults to your most practiced thoughts. Think about what that means. If worry has been your most practiced mental habit for years, your brain's resting state is worried. If shame has been rehearsed 1,000 times, the default mode network delivers shame on a platter the moment you're not distracted. This isn't a spiritual failing. This is synaptic architecture. The brain has built highways to those places because you've traveled them so many times. But here's the other side of that truth, and this is the part that should genuinely excite you. The brain is not static. It is not fixed. The principle of neuroplasticity, one of the most validated findings in modern neuroscience, tells us that the brain rewires itself based on repeated experience and focused attention. New pathways can be built. Old ones can be weakened through disuse. The architecture of your default mind is not permanent. What you repeat, the brain reinforces. What you starve, the brain reroutes. What you redirect consistently, intentionally over time, becomes the new default. This is not metaphor. This is measurable change in the physical structure of the brain. Researchers studying meditation practitioners, as cognitive behavioral therapy patients and mindfulness training participants, have documented actual structural changes in the brain. More grey matter in regions associated with attention regulation, reduced reactivity in the amygdala, strengthened connectivity in the prefrontal cortex. The brain changes. You can change it deliberately. Which is why what Paul wrote carries an entirely different weight when you see it through this lens. 2,000 years ago, writing from inside a Roman prison with chains on his wrists, the Apostle Paul gave the world what may be the most neurologically precise instruction ever recorded in ancient literature. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. Most people have heard it in passing. Some have it printed on a coffee mug. But the language Paul uses here is not devotional, it is surgical. Here he begins by describing the battlefield. He talks about strongholds. In Greek, the word is ochuromata, meaning a fortified garrison, a fortification built over time, stone by stone, that becomes an entrenched military position. Paul is describing something that wasn't built overnight. It was constructed gradually, reinforced repeatedly, until it became a stronghold, a place the enemy holds because we handed it to him, one repeated thought at a time. Sound familiar? Then he says this: we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. That phrase, take captive, is the Greek word aikmalotisontis. It's a military term. It means to seize a prisoner of war, to intercept an enemy combatant before they reach their target. Paul is not saying observe your thoughts calmly. He is not saying be aware of your thoughts and let them pass. He is saying intercept them, seize them, bring them into submission before they reach their destination in your emotional and behavioral world. This is not a coffee mug verse. This is a combat manual. And the neurological parallel is stunning. Modern cognitive science calls the same process cognitive interception, the act of catching an automatic thought before it triggers an emotional cascade and a behavioral response. Research in cognitive behavioral therapy has documented extensively that there is a brief window, sometimes as short as 90 milliseconds, between a triggering thought and your emotional reaction to it. In that window, you can intervene, you can intercept. Paul called it taking every thought captive. Neuroscientists call it cognitive reappraisal, that they are describing the same moment, the threshold between stimulus and response. And both are saying the same thing. You have power there, if you know how to use it. What I'm about to walk you through is a practice I call the intercept, a 3-second mental intervention grounded in both cognitive neuroscience and the specific Greek text of 2 Corinthians 10:5. This is not a meditation, it's not a journaling prompt. It is a moment-by-moment practice you can begin today. And the research on cognitive reappraisal and neuroplasticity tells us that with consistent repetition over 21 to 30 days, you can begin to observe measurable shifts in your default thought patterns. Here's how it works. Step 1. Notice. The moment you become aware of a thought, any thought, but especially the looping, fearful, or shame-based ones, you simply name it. Not analyze it. Not argue with it. Just notice it and name it. This is a fear thought. This is a shame thought. This is an anxiety thought. That act of naming alone does something powerful neurologically. Studies have shown that labeling an emotional experience, what researchers call affect labeling, reduces amygdala activation. In plain language, simply naming what you're experiencing begins to reduce its intensity. You are not inside the thought anymore. You are watching it. Step 2. Intercept. This is the los moment. You don't let the thought run its program. You step in front of it. You say, out loud if you can, internally if you must, I take this thought captive. You are not suppressing it. You are not pretending it didn't arrive. You are refusing to give it clearance to run. Think of it as a mental checkpoint. Every thought has to pass through the checkpoint. You are the officer at the gate. Not every thought gets through. Step 3. Replace. A thought doesn't vacate a space and leave a vacuum. The brain doesn't work that way. You cannot simply remove a thought. You have to replace it with something more true. This is where Philippians 4:8 enters. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely. Think about these things. Paul is not suggesting a spiritual gratitude list. He is describing a neural replacement strategy. You withdraw attention from the false pathway and redirect it to a true one. You say the true thing out loud. You direct your attention toward it. And you hold it there, even for 15 seconds, long enough for the brain to register where you've pointed it. Now, here's the timeline you need to understand so you're not caught off guard. In the first 7 days, this will feel mechanical, forced, awkward. You will feel like you're play acting. You will catch the thought, say the words, and then catch the same thought 3 minutes later. That is not failure. That is exactly what neurological rewiring looks like at the beginning. You are building a new pathway that barely exists yet. The old highway is still faster. You're constructing a dirt road. Keep going. By day 14, something shifts. And this is critical. The shift may feel like resistance, not progress. Many people at the 2-week mark feel irritated, emotionally raw, like the practice is stirring something up rather than calming things down. This is real, and it's documented in behavioral change research. When you begin to reroute a deeply ingrained pattern, the brain often produces discomfort as a kind of protest. It's not a sign you should quit. It's a sign the rewiring is actually beginning. Keep going. By day 21, the intercept begins to happen faster. The window between the thought and your response to the thought grows measurably longer. You'll catch yourself mid-spiral and notice it sooner than before. The replacement feels less forced. This is the neurological pathway thickening, what researchers call long-term potentiation, where repeated activation of a synaptic connection makes it easier and faster to activate again in the future. By day 30, as some people report that certain previously automatic thought patterns begin to arrive less frequently altogether. The default mode network has begun to default to a different place. Not perfectly, not permanently without maintenance, but measurably differently. Consistency over intensity. You don't need to do this perfectly, you need to do it repeatedly. And one more thing, give yourself the grace of imperfection in this process. Shame is not a motivator here. If you miss a day, if you catch the thought at step 3 instead of step 1, if the spiral ran for 20 minutes before you remembered, you haven't failed. You've simply started the next repetition later. That's all. Shame interrupts progress. Grace restores it. Right now, before you close this video, I want to pray over the infrastructure of your mind. So not your circumstances, not your outcomes. The architecture itself, the default patterns, the deep pathways, the strongholds that have been held too long, and the new pathways that are only beginning to form. Lord, you are the one who formed this mind. You know every pathway that runs through it, the ones that were carved by trauma, the ones carved by fear, the ones carved by years of rehearsing the worst-case scenario. And you are not surprised by any of them. You are not disappointed. You see the architecture, and you are already at work reshaping it. I pray for the person listening to this today, that the strongholds built over years begin to lose their grip, that every thought taken captive in your name would weaken the old pathway and strengthen the new one, and that the default mode of this mind would begin to default to truth, your truth, instead of the well-worn roads of fear and shame. That consistency would replace perfectionism in this process, and that grace would be the soil in which this rewiring grows. The world will not change overnight. The circumstances may not shift on your timeline, but the mind can change. The architecture can be reshaped. And when the mind changes, when the default patterns begin to align with truth, something shifts in how you move through every room, every relationship, every moment of quiet. You become harder to destabilize, more anchored, more free. Comment below the word intercept, not for me, but for yourself, as a declaration that you are beginning this practice. That today you are standing at the threshold of your own thought life and choosing to govern it rather than be governed by it. That changes everything.